We're the 12th of April 2023 as I start recording this video, and I intend to talk about my autism while eating my lunch. I don't know when I will publish these kind of videos, the talk while I am eating my breakfast or my lunch. But I will give anecdotes about autism. I became aware that I was autistic probably in December 2022. I mean, I realized that a lot of my behaviors as an individual could be explained because of autism. The kind of blunders I've watched a lot of videos by Autism from the Inside. That's a YouTube channel. Paul, I don't know the name, but Paul, I think he's Australian, and I relate to a lot. Also Paige, Layle. She's a blonde, autistic young woman, and others. Another, an autistic woman. I think she's an artist from Latvia, maybe. Yeah. An autistic teen also on a channel. Special books for kids. Yeah. So I briefly in this kind of video there is no planned order or structure, and maybe I will not even put the structure in the description. For this video I will do the minimum. That's really here's a good joke. That's my French self. I do the minimum while I work. That's a joke. That's a joke. The French entrepreneurs, they work very hard. I've bought books about this. They are robbed by the state. Yeah, that was a joke. I work even while I have lunch, which is the case. Yeah, so yeah, I will not put the order or the structure. I do this, I rewatch my planned videos or some non-planned videos when I think that putting the order can help the potential viewers, and it can help myself as well. But yeah, I won't do that. I won't do that. So, yeah. My story, very simplified. I left high school at age, I think, 16, just about to turn 16, just about to turn 17. So in 2009, and until 2019, for 10 years, I lived almost completely isolated. For 10 years, I think I had regular discussions with maybe 6 people, and regular means more than 2 or 3 times in 10 years maybe, and overall maybe I talked to 10 10 or 12 people during 10 years. Yeah, and then I found myself in hospital after an accident, and I resumed a more social life. So yeah. But about my autism. Yeah, in the year 2022, from the end of February, when I quit my bullshit job to try to become active because of the events in Ukraine, I spend the overwhelming majority of my time alone in an apartment, and over the month, especially after September, October 2022, I started to spend more and more time outside, interacting more and more with people. So I've had discussions recently over the past 6 months, one might say. But the more it happens, the more I realize that I make social blunders, one might say. I improve a lot because I'm kind of intelligent, and when I realize that my behavior is not appropriate, I change. I try to. But here are a few anecdotes. Probably it was in October or November, October maybe, I started cleaning the streets while going out, picking up the cigarette butts, the trash, etc., etc. And once I left a note on a cardboard asking any person randomly to pick up the trash, as I did, in exchange for an amount of money, and I left a banknote of 10 euros, broadly $10. So 1 hour of work at minimum wage law, one might say it's a significant amount of money in a time of economic difficulties. And I left it randomly, asking on the cardboard to the person who would pick up the banknote to spend, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes, I don't remember exactly, but to spend a few dozens of minutes picking up the cigarette. And when I came back to see if someone had done the work a few hours later, the cardboard was there, but not the banknote, and the cigarette butts hadn't been picked up. And I did not understand. But actually someone just saw a banknote, they took the banknote and they didn't care. This is an illustration of autistic misunderstanding of social norms. Another time, I started giving money to a person in the street to encourage her to make supplies, and that appeared as very weird. Another example, I made donations, and I still do sometimes, to a church, not because I'm a good a good formal Christian, but for me that's part of my my American Revolution, to try to be a good citizen, which means the people who have the financial means, they ought to help the community by giving donations instead of a parasitical welfare state. this is what has driven and still drives my involvement in community life. I don't go to church, but I give either food stamps or sometimes supplies. And when I started doing this, maybe in October or November, I don't remember exactly, but I received letters to thank me, and I even talked to persons who thanked me, and I did not understand, because for me that was how should I explain this? If you are vaguely religious, giving not giving money to the local church or mosque if you're a Muslim, or synagogue if you're a Jew, or temple or whatever, that's just common sense. But actually, I act often into the world with my categories, not the logical categories, but my historical, cultural categories. So I import unconsciously the categories here that was 19th century America. Charles Murray talks about this, or even ancient Rome, where the wealthy, I'm not particularly wealthy in comparison to the rich and the privileged, but I am not in financial difficulty, so I thought this was my duty to share with the community in the forms of donations for religious institutions. And so yeah, I acted, and I still do in a way with my categories, because I have a historical culture, and it appears as completely odd to most people. Yeah. Another time, I asked a person to prepare vegetables in exchange for money. And the person accepted, but I never saw the vegetables again. So I understood that when you give money to people who are in need of money, because I thought that I had to help, and sometimes I still try to do so, less and less, because it hasn't worked a lot. When you give money to homeless people or beggars, etc., usually these are people who suffer economically, psychologically, etc. So there's a reason why they are in this situation. So maybe it's counterproductive. I still try sometimes to give food stamps in exchange for a task, but it has failed with several times. Because the person, when they are not used to getting money or a lot of money, so when they do, they use this as an opportunity to, I don't judge them, to buy whatever they need, but yeah. So my 19th century American way of dealing with poverty has failed as well, and I understand that it's partly because of autism. Also, I've understood that people have social status. So here I am, it's partly autism and partly my working class background. I do not understand the social... my grandparents were working class people. Their children were slightly above in the social hierarchy, namely my parents, lower middle class, I would say, so slightly above working class, but not very well off, but comfortable, but without being wealthy, so lower middle class, one might say. So I have no understanding of social and sociological interactions. That's why spontaneously I do not judge people based on status differences in terms of wealth, but I understand that there are some places where you have to behave in a certain way. The private business owner, they would like ideally to attract a certain type of customers in terms of sociological belonging, and most of the time they do, because for every pub or a restaurant, it attracts a certain type of persons sociologically, and it's also partly determined ethnically. And unconsciously you feel when you are welcomed or not welcome, when you belong because you fit the unconscious criteria. It's not conscious discrimination from anyone. It's simply when I say selection of group belonging, certain types of people in terms of age, social status, ethnic origin, etc. They gather together, and there are some places which are open. I mean, all of them are open to all, but people spontaneously they gather with their social and sociological group, not necessarily class, but group. Yeah. So I'm kind of very stupid because empirically I've never had any real job experience and career, so I do not understand the distinction based on money, which makes me kind of dumb socially, but yeah. Yeah. Also, I have noticed several times, it was between the later month of 2022, when I just came out of my metaphysical training program, I started to talk about my encyclopedic view, and the persons that I talk to, intelligent person, usually not high, but middle class, on the right side of the bell curve, one might say. I created, or I provoked unconsciously negative reactions, not in terms of hostility, but people, they were uncomfortable when I started talking about my system. I made them feel uncomfortable, although I was trying to speak about philosophy. So, yeah. This is why I have lowered down my level of consciousness consciously in order to relate more to people. Yeah. I noticed that, yeah, people within society, they all have their role, their status, and both are tied. That's a sociological category, the role or the status, and it grants them a certain prestige or lack of prestige, and you have to respect the other people's status, otherwise they do not appreciate. But I fail to see, precisely that's one of the problems of autism, I fail to see who has what status, and there are people with relatively high status who are socially blind in the good sense, one might say. They are open to people of all origins, and there are those who really their status, it's kind of important, and they don't want to associate with certain kind of people if you do not dress well, if you do not behave well, if you do. Here I'm not talking about me on a singular level, but I notice because here I explain, when I left social life at the age of 16, 17, I was not very intelligent in terms of culture. I was not very intelligent, not very educated, so I spent more than 10 years, one might say, between 2009 and still to this day, acquiring a culture, and then confronting unconsciously my culture with the empirical, real, day-to-day interactions. So, yeah. And so yeah, I noticed that people, they treat each other or one another differently depending on status. Oh, yeah. That's not a judgment of value. I understand why. In group, out group, social distinction, etc., etc. Yeah. Also, here, Autism from the Inside has been enlightening. He says in one of his videos, I am not arrogant, I am autistic. Autistic people, they can appear as very arrogant. I'm not saying that they might not be sometimes. That's a psychological tendency. But without being arrogant, without wishing or intending to be arrogant, they appear very often. Without being arrogant, they appear as being very arrogant because they are usually very intelligent, and the others, they feel threatened by the intellectual superiority of highly autistic people. It's not the case for all, but for a lot of people, a lot of autistic people, Asperger, they are very competent intellectually, and therefore they appear as arrogant to others. And yeah, so the problem is that you have to mask, you have to downgrade yourself consciously, which requires a psychological effort, which can be very exhausting, because you have to pretend sometimes that you are more dumb than you really are, in order not to hurt others. Because if you just talk normally, and if the others, they feel that they can't relate because it's too complex, they might be hurt because they don't want to admit that they lack the intelligence or the culture. It's not necessarily the intelligence, but they don't want to admit that they lack the culture. So you have to constantly adapt. And if you make the other person, if he or she thinks that he has a status or she has a status, if you make the other person feel as if you are superior, and if the other person doesn't think that your status is worthy of challenging, even if it's not your intention, but if you are not worthy of challenging his status or his views, or not his status, but challenging the views that he holds, which are kind of protected by his status, socio-economic experience, etc., etc., you will hurt the person negatively. Yeah, so I've realized this. Which means the social game for an autistic person, it's really exhausting, because you have to adapt to others not only with politeness, I can do this, and most autistic people, they can do this very easily, so that it's not this kind of adaptation or common morality, but you have to adapt to the psychological subtleties of the others without necessarily all others, that's a fact, they are not all equally interesting in terms of conversation or knowledge or if you seek a conversation, you cannot pretend that all people are equal in terms of intelligence or interest or or knowledge. So if you have to do a very complex psychological work in real time while being with others to try not to hurt them, it's really exhausting. So it reinforces the will or the wish or the attempt not to interact too much with others, which kind of reinforces the autism, not neurologically or psychologically, but socially in a way. Because small talk, this is again what Paul from Autism from the Inside says, small talk, it can be pleasant and enjoyable, and it has helped me a lot, and I still do enjoy having small talk, ordinary talk with people. But when it's kind of forced, in order for sake of politeness, you have to do small talk, because when you are kind of forced to do small talk because the other person can't say anything really interesting in terms of culture, etc., it's kind of it can be exhausting. And about small talk, when I hear people talk, not all of them, but significantly, precisely the conversations, that's not a judgment, but most conversations, they revolve around food, the weather, gossip. Yeah. Yeah. Also, when you try to give pieces of advice to others to help them or to make them a gift, but with no no ill intention, either for me that's reciprocal self-interest. When I make gifts to people directly, I sometimes tell them, I told them, and I still do sometimes, it's in my interest that you become more responsible. When I offer books about economics, or when I offer books about prepping, or books about ecology, I explicitly say most of the time to the other person, or when I offer ecological products like reusable Q-tips, etc., reusable ear cleaners, or toothbrush, ecological toothbrush, etc. Usually I explicitly say to the other, I don't give you this item or this book because I want to buy your sympathy or your help, etc. It's because if more people thought better about the economy or were more ecological, it would be in everyone's interest. Or when I buy at small local businesses, sometimes I say this as well because that's the reason why I do so. It's in the best interest of everyone anywhere that his local community in terms of economics, wherever he finds himself, be as thriving as possible, because it's more financial independence, more autonomy, more reward for the entrepreneurs, which means a more liberal, in a good sense, economically liberal economy, more opportunities, less unemployment, less social problems, etc., etc. So sometimes when I make gifts, I explicitly say that's for reciprocal self-interest, or sometimes it's just because I enjoy giving. So that's why I do most anonymously, because I enjoy giving stuff to people, not because I'm a good person, but because it makes me feel good. The idea that I can contribute to the betterment of the local environment, but the economy and the world at large, because everything is interconnected. So when I give donations about ecological books or ecological organic food stamps, it makes me feel good, because I know that it's kind of good. It's not very expensive, either in terms of money or in terms of effort, but it makes me feel good, and it's really good, I think, because if it can change the consuming patterns of others while helping them or inspiring them, maybe that's good. So yeah, but making gifts or donations, it can also be a means of domination in a way, because there are competitions in most society, but in some of primitive societies, it's really highly complex. Donation, counter-donation, etc. That's a means in some primitive societies to appease conflicts among some American natives, either Southern American or native Indians, as they call this, in some tribes. That's a mean for the leaders or the competitors within each tribe or among tribes to compete with one another for prestige and status, but in a kind of a productive way. Instead of killing each other in a bloody battles, they do status battles, which kind of enrich or at least benefit the whole of the community. That was already the case in ancient Rome. Ancient Rome was a warlike society, but the aristocrats, the patricians, among one another, they were in competition to show off by helping the plebeian through donations, games. That was when Rome was already becoming decadent, but food, statues, maybe libraries, to build monuments to celebrate the greatness of the city. It was already the case in the Greek city-states, but then later in Rome, every consul, the two leaders before the advent of the empire, I don't know how you call this, but all the great men of Rome before the empire, for to celebrate every victory, or every usually to celebrate military triumph, they spend a lot of money publicly for a public bath, statues, games, wheat. They distributed wheat or food or bread. Not in a sense of bread of circuses. It was already partly the case, but the aristocrats, they competed among one another to gain status by helping the community. And at some moment, it degenerated in the first century BCE, because the aristocrats, they were really wealthy after all the military triumphs, and there were really violent tensions between the members of the aristocracy. That's what led to Sulla, Pompey, Caesar, etc., and eventually the establishment of the empire. But yeah, it's common in all societies, but here among the natives of the American continent, there were really tribes who had found a relative stability, in the sense that the tribesmen, the leader, the charismatic or the high status, or the leaders of the tribes, they were in competition with one another by giving one another donations. Yeah. Maybe I will start when my videos become famous, I've already started the competition who gives more money to the Ron Paul Institute or the Mises Institute or Free Domain by Stephen Molyneux or Wikipedia. I haven't made a donation to Wikipedia in a while, but the Libertarian institutes or forums, I don't know what you call this, or platforms, but the Mises Institute, Ron Paul, have sent hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands, probably thousands over the month, a few thousands of dollars if we accumulate all of them. Yeah, can you top that? Yeah. So yeah. Okay, and also, so that's what I noticed. The example to illustrate my autism. The failure to see the social codes or the social cues. Yeah. Also, here that's a little bit more political, but in an egalitarian society, and all modern Western societies are egalitarian, everyone believes that he or she is entitled to have an opinion on everything, and that one shouldn't challenge the other's opinion. In theory, I agree. That's the principle of freedom of speech. But the problem is that it can only be protected if the society respect private property. Because people, it's good that they might disagree on all sorts of topics. This is what drives the scientific process and the search for truth. But if they disagree with you ideologically, scientifically, ethically, religiously, etc., that's okay. But the problem is that if they use the coercive power of the state to impose their views by voting or by behaving like socialists in a way, if they impose their diverse behavior onto you through means of state coercion indirectly, it's not democratic in a good sense. It's socialist. That's why democracy leads to socialism, as Hans Hermann Hoppe noticed. It can be noticed empirically, but he gave the theoretical reasons. So that's why people, they don't like to be challenged as individuals on their personal level, but they use indirectly, by participating in the socialist circus, they participate in collective oppression, because the power of the state comes from the people granting the power to the state, the coercive, yeah, so yeah. Also another anecdote. So here are all the illustrations of autism in day-to-day life, and it goes back further than this, because even when I was socialized in my teen years and my child years and my teenage years, I had no psychological problem. At least it was not very developed in a way, but I was already very not lonely, but I never really appreciated group life, being with friends when I was a teenager, being with 2 or 3 friends, or sometimes 4, okay, but rarely more than 3 or 4 people. That was already public crowded places with a lot of people. I was not an intellectual in the sense. I never had profound, deep conversations when I was a teenager, because I had no culture. I had good conversations like most teenagers in normal circumstances, but I was not particularly talkative in a way. But nonetheless, I already unconsciously disliked being in crowded places with too many people, and I always felt better when I was alone with my girlfriend just being in the company of my teenage sweetheart was enough. Just me and her, and I was not a social guy. I had almost when I wanted to be with her, I wanted to be just with her, with no other persons. And if there were other persons, it was kind of well, I just wanted to be alone for. Yeah, that was a very intimate, in a way, relationship, and in this sense, I have never been much of a social. I didn't have social problems in terms of interactions, but I was never much talkative with strangers, one might say. Not very extrovert. I've always been an introvert. Yeah. Yeah. And in 2021, when I was vaguely socialized while receiving my training program to become an accountant, not to become a German metaphysician, that would come later. So I had lectures or classes, broadly 40 hours a week in 2021, the second half. And I was one of the very few person in the class to ask questions frequently, because I was not passionate about accountancy, but I asked nonetheless a lot of questions in every class, because I felt that it was interesting, not the topic as such, but when you are invested in a training to get a job, I was, out of a sense of duty or simply out of a sense of interest and respect for knowledge, I was interested and I asked a lot of questions, and I was one of the very few persons, one of the only person to ask questions. And now I understand with the lens of autism, I spontaneously believed that I was an idiot because I was one of the very few people to ask questions. And so an autistic person in this context, in class, I unconsciously believe that the reason why I was one of the only persons to frequently ask questions was because I was an idiot, because I assume that the others, if they do not ask questions, it's because they understand everything when the teacher spoke. And because I did not understand everything all the time, I asked frequently questions, and others didn't. So I believe that I was an idiot, and the others, they were smart. But actually, no. The others, most of them, they do not ask questions, not because they understand everything, but either because they don't understand anything or because they don't care. Yeah, it took me a while to realize this. I was very active, but not in a psychologically unbalanced way. I was active in a sense that I was in a training program. I was not passionate about the topics being taught, but I was passionate about gaining knowledge because I wanted to get a job, to become a productive member of society, and I knew that knowledge was valuable and could be useful, and I had respect for the fact that knowledge was being transmitted. So I was, in the sense, I was very, I wouldn't say passionate, but I was involved intensely. And yeah. Also, another problem or another anecdote about autism, over the years I have talked more and more with more and more people, and I receive almost no feedback. It has taken me a lot of time to understand it, either in empirical conversations or the videos that I've posted, the hundreds of videos that I've posted on my various channels over the years. I receive almost no feedback. And I understood this probably in June 2022, around June, that the reason why most people do not react when I talk. I'm not talking here about small talk or the small talk. I understand why, because most of the time it's just politeness. Yeah, it's small talk. But I'm not talking about the very complex, logical, metaphysical, encyclopedic view. But when I talk about different topics spontaneously, I receive very few signs of interest in the people that I've talked to over the years. And I have believed that it was because I had nothing interesting to say, Because how could I get a validation? How could I envision that others might be interested if I had never had any sign that what I said was interesting? But actually I realized by interacting more over the past few months that the reason why when I talk, most people, I don't want people to blindly listen to what I say, but simply sometimes when I say interesting things and there's no reaction, I believe that it was because what I said was not interesting. But actually no. Because my standards, here I've lowered my standards, but still when I talk about sociobiology, IQ, economics, etc., the standard that I compare myself with are the standards of the people who are competent in this field, the Austrian economists, the evolutionary psychologists like Mr. David Booth, etc., Richard Lynn, Edward Dutton in the realm of IQ, etc., etc. That's again an autistic tendency. What I say, I believe that it's not interesting because I am not capable empirically to talk about IQ or evolutionary psychology or economics like the people that I've just mentioned are capable of doing. But actually very few people except them who are the leaders or some of the best in their field can talk the way they do. Yeah. So, yeah. And the people as individuals that I've been spontaneously attracted to have been autistic in my spiritual experience. Forgotten Roots, when I discovered him in 2017, I knew he was autistic, but I didn't know what autistic meant. But now, many years later, I understand that he was kind of weird, but in a good sense. He was very detached, interested in Indian metaphysics, and kind of interested in the world, but not in the modern world. And this was my first spiritual experience, and I am spiritually connected to him, and I understand now, many years later, that it's partly because he was an intelligent pagan, of course, but partly because of autism as well. Yeah. All the people that I've had spiritual experiences with, as of now, they are being diagnosed or being classified as autistic. Yeah. And every time I encounter an autistic person on a YouTube channel, the ones that I've listed before, I relate a lot. I bought a book by Mr. Paul Elkarat, a Franco-Moroccan bright person who wrote an autobiography about his autism, which has helped me a lot to understand that we had similarities. I had similarities with autistic people. So the people that I spontaneously love and feel attracted to intellectually, and that I appreciate spontaneously as individuals, most of them, they are autistic, independently of ideology and of race. I have watched videos by Afro-American autistic people, and I relate a lot. These are people who are highly intelligent, and they are I relate a lot. They are not just highly intelligent in terms of IQ, but they are intelligent, probably very high in IQ, but also they have really an autistic perspective, which is kind of unique. So here I will make a joke. Autistic people of the world, unite! Then the autistic people of the world, they unite. But then it becomes unbearable because we can't stand being too much. So it fails. The attempt, it succeeds because autistic people, they feel alone sometimes. So let us unite. Then they gather. There are too much people around. Too many people around here. Let us separate again. That's a good joke for the autistic people. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so these are examples that I am aware of my autism. Yeah. And here, I can't help but think about Caroline and have empathy, because it's very difficult sometimes to have autism. It's very difficult, but to be involved in public discourse with people who are less intelligent when you are autistic is really exhausting. And for a woman, it's even more exhausting and demanding. So, yeah. The people that I spontaneously love, if they are not autistic, here I'm talking people as individuals. If they are not autistic, most of the time they are loners. But maybe often it's correlated, but yeah. That's why I don't like politics, because politics is group not group belonging, but group collective action, and people, they become stupid when they act in groups. And politics, it's the leftists who believe in the spontaneity of the masses. It's really stupid, because people in a mass, they are like I don't know what to say, but people here, that's my view. My view about politics. In a group of people, if you take people individually, no matter what their level of intelligence or culture, they can be enlightened and or enlightening, potentially, without discrimination of any kind. If the person is rational and relatively intelligent nonetheless, because really people with a very, very low IQ, no culture, that's very difficult. But people, if talking to them as individuals, I could talk potentially to anyone. If talking long enough in peaceful conditions, we would come to an agreement, or at least to an interesting conversation. But when people gather in groups, they become stupid, in a way, collectively. Yeah. And that's why that's my Protestant self. Protestantism is the religion of the direct relationship with God. The Protestant, I'm not a formal Protestant, I'm not a formal anything, but I identify as a Protestant because that's direct relationship to God and no intermediary. You don't need the priest, you don't need the church, you don't even need the Bible. It can help, but it's the direct connection with God. That's the Protestant view. The view of Martin Luther. There are other formal aspects, etc., but that's the most important idea, one might say. Yeah. Yeah. Also, I wouldn't say lazy, because when I decide to work, I can work very hard, very intensely, consistently, and that's what I've been doing. I have no intention of stopping. So I'm not, strictly speaking, lazy, but I am a little bit idle. Not, maybe at some moments of my life it was because of laziness, but actually it's kind of a, how should I explain this? It's when you are talented. Here I'm not bragging, but that's how it works. There are in the NBA, football, etc. It happens a lot. Football players who are really talented, but they do not really work very hard, because that's no longer my case. I work very hard, but I used to not work very hard already in high school because I was a little bit arrogant, etc. And I was not really interested in schooling at the time. But there have been some moments of my life where I was really a little bit idle, one might say, because of autistic people. They suffer from this as well. They can be very intelligent, very competent, but be nonetheless incompetent in certain domain, because it's kind of a, how should I explain this? It looks like arrogance, but actually most of the time it's not. But how should I explain this? I will formulate this differently. For instance, the reason why my videos are kind of very poor in the formal aspect, the presentation, no editing, the sound, the camera, etc. If I wanted to, I could have already last year, really, if I wanted to make formally pleasing video, I would spend an entire month. I would have the method. I would buy the books, study, look at the videos, how to edit your video, invest in a editing tool, and I would make great video, music, sound. It would be interesting, but it sounds like arrogant. Maybe it is, but actually no. It's exhausting, and it's not worth it. In my view, actually, maybe it is, but I don't want to make this kind of effort, and it's not because I'm lazy, because the intellectual effort, the ethical effort, I do this, and I've been doing this consistently for now almost 14 months with almost no rest, or really when I was in overdrive. So it's not a problem of laziness. It's kind of, it looks like arrogance, but it's just I cannot express this. And I know that autistic people, they think like this, and it's not arrogant in a sense. Oh, I'm too good to care about the bureaucratic aspect. No, because I can clean my dishes, clean the laundry, pick up the trash. I can do humble tasks on my own with no problem. But when you have to invest a lot of time in a bureaucratic task which is not really interesting, with the pressure of producing good intellectual content, here really I make very few efforts. Maybe I will try to improve, but actually I don't want to, because it's counter to everything I believe in. And the good presentation, they are already available. If you want interesting content about spiritual topic, listen to modern pop music: Eminem, Lady Gaga, Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, Kanye West, Katy Perry, etc., etc. Yeah. And also, whenever this has been a recurrent feature of my life as an empirical individual, whenever I invest myself in a topic of interest, I invest myself fully and passionately, maybe a little bit excessively, but actually no, I just invest myself passionately. And this is characteristic of autistic people. It's not special interest, but simply when I really get interested in something, I invest myself fully. Yeah. If examples, I was interested a few years ago in video games, but not as such, but simply, actually I was, but when I started to become interested in video games, it was around probably 2020. after I had stopped playing for many years, I wanted to buy all the good games, not to play all the games, but simply in an attempt to collect, like Pokemon. The guy who invented Pokemon, he was autistic. There's decided to collect, to catch them all, not because it's interesting genuinely as such, but it's kind of a systematic demand that autistic people impose upon themselves, some of them at least unconsciously. The same goes with books. The history of philosophy, I am interested in philosophy. I do not even read the books, but just for the sake of having a complete library, I still keep buying the classics to complete my library. I don't read these books, but it's just that I'm interested in philosophy. I have to have all the great books, at least. Yeah, the economics, that's the same. Since I started becoming interested in Austrian economics, I do not have the time to read all the books, but as some sort of a moral requirement, moral, in a way it is, because it participates in sharing knowledge and intelligence, but my moral requirement is to have all the books which revolve around this topic. Mises, Hayek, Hazlitt, Rothbard, Hopper, Byland, Di Lorenzo, Chase Rachels, yeah. That's how I function. It looks like compulsory buying. It's not consumption because I don't even have the time to read these books, but it's simply some sort of a, if I'm interested, I have to have a complete set, and if there are pieces missing, it's frustrating. Yeah. Yeah. I think I will give another anecdote. No, that's connected to autism. Breath of the Wild, the Zelda game. I played this game in 2021 while I was working to get a diploma and then my training. I played the game twice. The first time I kind of finished the game while playing, discovering but not thoroughly, and I replayed the game a second time, and here I went into autistic mode unconsciously, but I explored all the maps of the area, all the zone, all the areas of the map. I did not collect all the Korok seeds, but without a guide, I wanted to collect as much as possible. I think I got 2/3. At some moment it really becomes exhausting because it's not really that interesting once you have collected 600, the 605th and 6th, 7th, it's not really that interesting, but I played like an autistic person because I systematically explored the map. The first time I played the game, I explored and I completed the game in a relative short amount of time. I don't remember exactly, but the second time that I played, I really wanted to explore everything, and I enjoyed it. It was really enjoyable and exciting, and yeah. And I understand that this is partly related to autism, that I illustrate with modern pop culture how an autistic person plays a game like Breath of the Wild, explores systematically all the areas of the map to get most Korok seeds, the shrines, side quests, really in a systematic way. It's kind of work, but enjoyable work. Like today, I play for 2 hours. I will explore this part of the map systematically, etc. That's really work and enjoyment. They are often connected for an autistic person. At least that's my personal experience. Namely, I find enjoyment in working, and when I try to enjoy myself, I impose upon myself working requirements unconsciously. I mix kind of the two, and it's kind of sometimes it's not pleasant, and sometimes I enjoy myself without working much, less and less, because I already told this anecdote, but while I was in my training program, during lunch, it's been 1 hour, I will soon stop the video. During my lunch, I work 8 hours a day 40 hours a week, and during my lunch I had a 1 hour pause. I read Mises while eating, or evolutionary psychology, or ancient history, history of antiquity. It is only now that I realize that this is the kind of thing that autistic people do and that most other peoples don't. Yeah. I'm a systematizer and a collector, a knowledge collector and a systematizer, independently of the boring German metaphysician. And I know that metaphysically I'm a German because I think like the Germans. I do not have the training that they had, Kant, Fichte, Schelling, Hegel, etc., or Leibniz, but I think like them, spontaneously. If German metaphysics did not exist, one should invent it. A good joke that I'm thinking about. Let us imagine ancient Greece, Athens, the day of its glory. Well, before the conflict with Sparta, actually, well, after the Peloponnesian War, when Athens had lost, so the glory was already fading away a little bit. But let us imagine the young Plato. There's a sculptor, here that's fiction, but there's a sculptor who just made a new statue of Aphrodite, a very large statue, a beautiful, naked Greek goddess, and he goes see Plato in his academia. Hey, Plato, I just finished my new statue, it's beautiful, that's Greek marble, we're the most intelligent, most refined, probably greatest artistic people ever. Would you like to take the time to go on the Agora to give it a look? And Plato would say, "Excuse me, I have to I have to think about my dialectical metaphysical interaction. I'm busy thinking, the Parthenon, the statues, the Olympic Games." No, I'm not interested. The beautiful Greek women. No, I'm not interested. I have my dialectical, metaphysical games to think about. Yeah. I can make the same joke with Aristotle. Let us imagine that's fiction. Alexander comes to see Aristotle. Excuse me, dear Aristotle. I intend to go conquer the Persian Empire, go to India. We will discover new peoples, new countries, new species. We will explore the earth. We will conquer half of Asia. Are you interested? And Aristotle said, no, excuse me, I want to collect, I want to finish collecting data about all the species, the aquatic species in the Greek coastline. I haven't finished yet, plus I have to polish my rhetorical, my books on rhetoric. I will let you explore the world. I have intellectual work to do. This is not how it happened, but maybe Aristotle would have said so. Okay, it's been 1 hour and 10 minutes. I will stop the video here. I intended and I still do to record a structured video this afternoon that I've been working on. Now I will take a short pause. I will go outside a little bit to get some exercise and some fresh air, to pick up the cigarette trash. Yeah. I don't know if or when I post this video. At some moment probably. I intend, as I record it, I intend the videos like this during breakfast or lunch or supper. I will plan the posting many days or many weeks in advance, so they will be probably automatically published. I don't know when, but this is what I was thinking about at this moment. I will not even rewatch them before posting, so I don't know which one talks about what. This video was about autism. If you have taken the time to watch this, you will have noticed this. Otherwise, yeah. My joke about autistic people of the world, unite! That was kind of a good joke. Here I will make a poetic remark. Autistic people, Asperger at least, they are kind of points of light. So they are very bright, very brilliant, because they are sparsely they are separated in a way. So they are brilliant, like points of light, like stars in the night sky. But if you try to reunite all of them, they would become maybe more brilliant, but actually they would lose their brilliance, because there would be only one collective light. So the autistic people, they are really brilliant. They shine like stars in a way. For those who know how to notice intelligent, interesting people, they are shining like diamonds. But if they united together, maybe they would shine less. That would be one big light, but yeah, they stand out in the crowd of neurotypical people which inhabit this planet. Yeah. Maybe, yeah, that's a joke. Maybe I will start a political party for autistic people. The autistic workers, the autistic people's worker party. The party of the autistic workers. I might. Yeah. Yeah. The party of the autistic people. Yeah. So that's what I could say. That's what I have. And also, I intend to make a video about psychoanalysis. So here I've talked about psychology. It's not really psychiatry, because it's not really a disease. It's not a mental health problem as such. I mean, it can cause problem, but it cannot be cured. It's not a disease. Autism is not a disease. It's just a different wiring. I will pick up the... it's not a disease, so it's not a psychiatric problem as such. But this is what I could say empirically about my autism. I've partly read a few testimony in books. I've watched a lot of videos, and I will continue to do so sometimes when I can. Yeah. That's just an aspect of me, but it helps me understand myself, and if people are interested in trying to understand me as an individual, empirically, I've given tips. I try to correct the blunders, the social blunders, but not to the point of adapting to norms of social behavior which are sometimes really wrong or dumb collectively. So I try to make efforts, because I reject social nihilism. I really try to fit in and to adapt to others in a good, civilized, polite, social way whenever I can. But yeah, so I try to correct my social blunders, but yeah, my energy and work and focus is dedicated to providing a unique intellectual view, which is partly the result, if we leave aside the religious and philosophical aspect. My autistic self is partly responsible for shaping and structuring my worldview and my behavior, for sometimes for odd, clumsy, weird behavior, but sometimes maybe for the good. Yeah, so